The dusty streets of Willow Creek were a silent witness to the struggles of its poorest residents. Among them was Ethan Carter, a 15-year-old boy whose hands bore the calluses of relentless labor. The son of Thomas Carter, a bitter man defeated by life, and Mary Carter, a mother confined to her bed by illness, Ethan's world was a canvas painted in shades of despair. Each morning, as the first light broke through their weathered shack, Ethan would rise before the roosters crowed. He trudged to the nearby mill, where he spent his days lifting sacks of grain far heavier than his wiry frame should have managed. He had dropped out of school not out of choice but necessity, yet every coin he earned seemed to disappear into the black hole of bills and his mother's endless medical needs. The townsfolk mocked him. "A Carter will always be a nobody," they would sneer, their laughter cutting deeper than any physical strain. Ethan heard it all, but he never let them see his pain. Instead, he found fleeting solace in the town library, devouring old newspapers and magazines after work. It was there that he stumbled upon the story of Andrew Maxwell, a man who had risen from rags to riches through sheer determination. The words on the page lit a fire in Ethan's soul. One evening, as his mother coughed weakly from the corner of their dimly lit room, Ethan stared at the torn article he had carried in his pocket for weeks. "I will make it, Mama," he whispered, his voice trembling with both fear and conviction. "I'll get us out of here. I promise." But his father, Thomas, had overheard. "Get rich?" Thomas scoffed, his voice laced with bitterness. "You're nothing but a dreamer, boy, just like me, and dreams don't put food on the table." His words hung in the air like a curse. The argument that followed was explosive. Thomas hurled his failures at Ethan like weapons, insisting the boy was destined to inherit the same miserable life. But Ethan stood his ground. "I am not you," he shot back, his eyes blazing. "I refuse to live and die in this hole." That night, as his mother lay sleeping, Ethan packed what little he owned, a worn satchel, a loaf of bread, and the crumpled article. He kissed his mother's forehead, his heart heavy with guilt, but fueled by desperation. "I'll come back for you," he whispered. And with that, he stepped into the cold, unforgiving night, leaving behind the only home he had ever known. The road ahead was uncertain, but Ethan's resolve was unshakable. He was determined to rewrite his destiny, no matter the cost. The clatter of train wheels against rusted tracks echoed through the night as Ethan clung to the side of a freight car, his fingers numb from the cold. The journey was perilous. Every jolt threatened to send him tumbling into the darkness below, but fear was a small price to pay compared to the suffocating despair he had left behind. He had nothing to lose and everything to prove. For days, Ethan survived on scraps of bread and stolen sips of water from railway stops. The nights were long, the air biting, but his resolve remained firm. When the train screeched to a halt near a small town in Texas, Ethan saw his chance. Leaping from the moving car, he hit the ground hard, his knees scraping against gravel. As he dusted himself off, the realization struck him. He was alone, penniless, and had no idea what lay ahead. The town was modest, its dusty roads lined with wooden storefronts and weathered signs. Hunger gnawed at Ethan's stomach, but he pushed forward, his eyes scanning for any opportunity. At the edge of town, he stumbled upon a group of men gathered near a large farm. A tall, imposing figure stood among them. Mr. Grayson, the farm owner, was barking instructions. "We need strong hands for the harvest," Grayson announced. "Pays low, but the work's honest." Ethan hesitated, noticing the muscular men vying for the positions. His own frame, lean and wiry, seemed out of place among them. But desperation gave him courage. He pushed through the crowd and called out, "I'll do whatever it takes." The men around him laughed. Grayson raised an eyebrow. "You? Looks like the wind could knock you over, boy." Thinking quickly, Ethan pointed to a nearby boulder and said, "If I can lift that, will you hire me?" The crowd murmured in amusement as Ethan approached the rock. Though his muscles screamed in protest, he hoisted it an inch off the ground, then dropped it with a thud. He turned back to Grayson, panting but defiant. The older man chuckled. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. Fine, you're hired. Don't make me regret it. Ethan's first days on the farm were grueling. Blisters formed on his hands, his back ached, and every muscle felt like it was on fire, but he refused to quit. As the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, he would sit by the barn, staring out at the endless fields, imagining a future where he could own land like this. It was during one of these evenings that Ethan met Jake Harris, another laborer. Jake, the son of a once wealthy farmer, had fallen on hard times after his family lost their land. He carried an air of quiet defeat, but beneath it, Ethan sensed a spark of ambition. "You've got big dreams, don't you?" Jake asked one night, watching Ethan sketch plans for a machine on the dirt floor of the barn. Ethan nodded. "And you? Why are you here?" Jake sighed. "I'm here because I have to be. But one day, I'll rebuild what my family lost. A bigger, better farm than this one." Their shared struggles forged a bond between them. Together they dreamed of brighter days, their conversations filled with plans to escape the cycle of poverty that bound them. In Jake, Ethan found not just a friend, but a kindred spirit, a partner in hope. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan began to prove himself on the farm. He wasn't the strongest worker, but his quick thinking and determination earned Grayson's respect. Slowly, he started to see a glimmer of the future he was fighting for. But this was only the beginning. Texas would test Ethan in ways he could never have imagined, pushing him to the brink before offering him a chance to rise. The relentless heat of the Texas sun bore down on the farm, its golden light glinting off the endless rows of crops. Ethan Carter wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed the fields. Weeks of grueling labor had hardened his body, but his mind remained restless. Something about the way the farm operated gnawed at him. It was chaotic, slow, and inefficient. Every day, workers moved haphazardly, wasting energy and time. Ethan's eyes scanned the farm like a strategist surveying a battlefield. His thoughts began to churn, piecing together a better way. One evening, as the other workers gathered around a makeshift fire, laughing and trading stories, Ethan approached Mr. Grayson, who was perched on a wooden crate, tallying the day's earnings. "Mr. Grayson," Ethan began hesitantly, clutching his cap in his hands. "I've been thinking about the way we work out there. It's messy. I think I might have an idea to make it better." The older man raised an eyebrow, amused but intrigued. "You've got my attention, Carter. Go on." Ethan explained his vision. Instead of everyone tackling the same tasks randomly, they could divide the work into specific roles, creating an assembly line approach. One team would till the soil, another would plant seeds, and a third would water and maintain the crops. Each worker would focus on one task, making the process faster and more organized. Grayson leaned back, stroking his chin. "You think this'll actually work?" "I know it will," Ethan replied confidently. "We'll finish the harvest faster, and you'll save money on labor costs." The next day, Grayson decided to let Ethan put his idea to the test. With Jake's help, Ethan rallied the workers, explaining the new system. Skepticism filled the air, but Ethan's determination was infectious. By midday, the fields buzzed with newfound efficiency. Workers moved like cogs in a well-oiled machine, their productivity doubling by the end of the week. Grayson watched from the edge of the field, a satisfied grin creeping across his face. He called Ethan over as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon. "You've got a sharp mind, boy," Grayson admitted, handing Ethan an envelope. Inside was a bonus, a crisp $10 bill, more than Ethan had ever seen in one place. Ethan's heart swelled with pride. For the first time, his ideas had been recognized and rewarded. That evening, he penned a letter to his mother, tucking a portion of the money inside. Though it wasn't much, it was enough to buy her medicine and let her know he hadn't forgotten his promise. As the days passed, Ethan grew closer to Mr. Grayson, who began to take a mentor-like role. One evening, as they shared a rare moment of quiet on the porch, Grayson said, "You've got potential, Carter. But let me tell you something important. Success isn't just about working hard. It's about leading, about seeing the bigger picture and making others believe in it too. True success comes from leading, not just following. The words struck Ethan like a lightning bolt. Leadership, vision. These weren't just abstract ideas. They were tools, weapons in his fight against the poverty that had shackled him for so long. As the summer wore on, Ethan's ideas continued to transform the farm's operations, earning him respect from the workers and even more from Grayson. But deep down, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The lessons he was learning here would one day be the foundation of something far greater. The boy who had arrived in Texas with nothing now had something invaluable: knowledge, experience, and the seeds of a dream too big for this farm to contain. The Texas evening sky burned a deep orange, casting a warm glow over the town's community center. Inside, laughter and music filled the air as young men and women twirled across the wooden dance floor. Ethan Carter stood awkwardly by the punch bowl, his rough hands clutching a glass he hadn't touched. He didn't belong here, and he knew it. Yet something had drawn him in, a faint hope for a moment of normalcy amidst the chaos of his life. That's when he saw her, Sophia Bennett. Her presence was magnetic, her beauty undeniable. Dressed in a simple yet elegant dress, she moved with a grace that made the room seem to revolve around her. But it wasn't just her appearance that struck Ethan. It was the way she carried herself, confident and intelligent, a sharp contrast to the shallow chatter of the others. Summoning courage he didn't know he had, Ethan approached her. "Hi," he blurted out, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm Ethan. I noticed you from across the room." Sophia turned, her curious eyes meeting his. A smile played on her lips, equal parts amused and intrigued. "Well, Ethan, you've got my attention. What do you want to say?" The words spilled out before he could stop them. "I think you're the most fascinating person here, and I'd like to get to know you." The directness of his statement caught her off guard, but it also earned her respect. Most men danced around their intentions. Ethan's honesty was refreshing. "All right, Ethan," she said, offering her hand. "Let's dance." Their connection deepened as the night went on, but their budding rapport didn't go unnoticed. Charles Whitmore, a wealthy local businessman and one of Sophia's suitors, watched the pair with thinly veiled disdain. When Ethan escorted Sophia outside for some fresh air, Charles followed, his expensive shoes crunching against the gravel path. "Well, well," Charles sneered, blocking their path. "It seems the farmhand thinks he's a gentleman now. Tell me, Carter, do you really think you can compete with someone like me?" Ethan clenched his fists but kept his composure. "I don't need to compete with you, Whitmore. I'll be someone on my own terms, and it'll be more than you could ever imagine." Charles laughed, dismissive. "Dreams don't pay the bills, boy." Ethan turned to Sophia, his voice steady but full of conviction. "Maybe not yet, but I have something more valuable than money, ambition, and I'll prove it." Sophia, impressed by Ethan's resolve, gently touched his arm. "Let's go," she said, her tone firm. As they walked away, she whispered, "Don't let him get to you. I believe in you." In the weeks that followed, Sophia became more than just someone Ethan admired. She became his greatest ally. Over quiet evenings, she introduced him to books and ideas he'd never considered, encouraging him to educate himself. When Ethan dismissed the idea of formal schooling, Sophia didn't push back. Instead, she challenged him to learn in his own way, using the world as his classroom. "You don't need a degree to be smart," she told him one evening, handing him a stack of borrowed books. "But knowledge is power, Ethan. Use it." Her belief in him fueled his determination. Ethan threw himself into self-improvement, devouring everything from business principles to engineering concepts. Their time together inspired him to dream bigger, to push harder, and to see beyond the boundaries of the life he had known. For the first time, Ethan felt like he wasn't alone in his quest. With Sophia by his side, he began to believe that his ambitions weren't just foolish dreams. They were the seeds of a future he was destined to create. The hum of the engine echoed through the rugged Texas landscape as Ethan Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel of a battered delivery truck. The logo of Frontier Logistics, a high-stakes courier service, was faded but recognizable on the side of the vehicle. It wasn't glamorous, but for Ethan, this was more than a job. It was an opportunity. After leaving the farm, Ethan had heard whispers of Frontier Logistics, a company known for handling dangerous yet lucrative delivery routes across the country. The pay was decent, but the risks were high. Transporting valuable goods through remote areas made couriers prime targets for bandits. Ethan saw this not as a danger, but as a challenge. His first week on the job was a crash course in survival. The roads were rough, the schedules brutal, and the threats constant. Yet Ethan thrived in the chaos, quickly mastering the art of making split-second decisions. Whether it was navigating treacherous terrain or evading suspicious vehicles trailing him on empty highways, he learned that staying calm under pressure was the key to survival. One particular route, however, would test him in ways he couldn't have anticipated. Tasked with transporting a shipment of rare jewels to a buyer in another state, Ethan knew the job was high stakes. The company had assigned him to drive alone, a move that was both a sign of trust and a gamble. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate road, Ethan spotted headlights in his rearview mirror. At first, he dismissed them, assuming it was another vehicle headed in the same direction. But the lights stayed close, uncomfortably close. Then it happened. A black SUV swerved in front of him, forcing Ethan to slam on the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt as two masked men leaped out, weapons in hand. "Out of the truck!" one of them barked, banging on the driver's side door. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't fight them directly, but surrendering the shipment wasn't an option. Thinking fast, he pretended to comply, stepping out with his hands raised. As one thief climbed into the cab to search for the goods, Ethan used the momentary distraction to grab a tire iron from the truck bed. With a calculated swing, he struck the man nearest to him, sending him sprawling. The commotion startled the other thief, who turned to face Ethan just as he jumped into the cab and slammed the door shut. Revving the engine, Ethan rammed the SUV, blocking his path, creating enough space to escape. The sound of gunshots echoed behind him as he sped down the road, heart pounding but alive. When Ethan finally reached his destination, the shipment intact, he was greeted by the stunned yet impressed faces of his supervisors. Word of his bravery spread quickly, and the company rewarded him with both recognition and a bonus. Amid the chaos, Ethan was reunited with Jake Harris, his old friend from the farm, who had also joined Frontier Logistics. Their bond reignited over shared stories of survival and ambition. Jake's unwavering determination reminded Ethan why he had taken this path in the first place: to build a future that was bigger than either of them had ever dreamed. The barren patch of land stretched endlessly before Ethan Carter, dry and lifeless under the scorching Texas sun. It wasn't much, just a modest piece of property he had managed to purchase with his hard-earned savings. To others, it looked like a futile investment. But to Ethan, it was the seed of a dream, a chance to break free from the grind of manual labor and provide a future for his growing family. Ethan had poured every dollar he had into drilling for oil, convinced that the land held untapped potential. Day after day, the drilling rig roared to life, its metallic hum a backdrop to his determination. Yet, despite weeks of effort, the results were the same: dry holes and mounting frustration. His wife, Sophia, watched silently, torn between supporting her husband's ambition and worrying about their dwindling finances. Their 4 children, Lucas, Emma, Clara, and Sam, were too young to understand the weight of the situation, but the tension in the household was palpable. Meals became simpler, bills piled up, and Ethan's resolve began to crack under the pressure. One evening, as Ethan sat by the rig, his head in his hands, Lucas, his eldest son, approached him. "Dad," the boy said, his voice hesitant yet curious, "why not ask someone who knows more about oil?" "Like a professional?" Ethan looked at his son, the simplicity of the suggestion cutting through the fog of his frustration. It was so obvious, yet he had been too stubborn to see it. Determined to turn things around, Ethan used the last of his savings to hire a geologist, Dr. Alan Greaves, a seasoned expert with a reputation for finding oil in the most unlikely places. Dr. Greaves arrived with an air of quiet confidence, his weathered face betraying years of experience. He surveyed the land meticulously, taking samples, analyzing data, and mapping out potential drilling sites. Days turned into weeks, and just as Ethan began to lose hope, Dr. Greaves approached him with a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "I've found something," the geologist announced. "A reservoir, massive, deep, and untouched. You've struck gold, Ethan. Black gold." The news hit Ethan like a thunderclap. He barely had time to process it before the drilling began anew, this time with a clear target. When the rig finally roared to life and crude oil burst from the ground, Ethan fell to his knees, overwhelmed by a mix of relief and triumph. Word spread quickly, and soon Ethan's small patch of land became the epicenter of a thriving oil operation. Contracts flooded in, partnerships were formed, and Ethan found himself navigating a world he had only dreamed of. With the newfound wealth, he expanded his business, purchasing additional land and investing in better equipment. For the first time, the Carters were no longer burdened by poverty. Sophia could finally rest easy. Their children had opportunities they could never have imagined, and Ethan stood on the precipice of something extraordinary. But as the oil flowed and the money poured in, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that success came with its own set of challenges. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about legacy, responsibility, and proving to the world and to himself that he was more than a lucky break. The oil boom transformed Ethan Carter's life in ways he had never imagined. What had once been a barren plot of land was now the heart of a sprawling empire, with pumps and rigs stretching across the horizon. Ethan, now a millionaire, became a household name in the region. But with success came new challenges, ones that tested not just his business acumen, but his humanity. Ethan's meteoric rise didn't sit well with everyone, particularly Mr. Grayson, his former employer. Grayson, who had once given Ethan his first job on the farm, now saw an opportunity to stake a claim in Ethan's fortune. Fueled by jealousy and greed, Grayson filed a lawsuit, alleging that Ethan's initial investments had been made using techniques and funds borrowed from him. The accusations sent shockwaves through the community and left Ethan reeling. Desperate to protect his name and his company, Ethan turned to Isaac Daniels, a sharp and unrelenting lawyer with a reputation for dismantling opposition in the courtroom. Isaac worked tirelessly, sifting through documents and crafting an airtight defense. In the courtroom, his eloquence and precision shone. Grayson's claims crumbled under scrutiny, and within days, the case was dismissed. As the verdict was announced, Ethan felt a wave of relief, but also a pang of regret. "Grayson was a part of my past," Ethan confided to Isaac afterward. "I never wanted it to come to this." While Ethan triumphed professionally, his personal life began to unravel. The demands of managing an oil empire consumed him, pulling him further away from his family. Sophia, once his strongest ally, grew distant, her quiet disapproval weighing heavily on him. Their children, now teenagers, enjoyed the trappings of wealth but lacked the grounding Ethan had hoped to instill. Lucas, the eldest, had developed an entitled attitude, while the younger ones seemed to view money as an endless resource. One evening, after yet another late night at the office, Ethan returned home to find Lucas waiting for him. "You're never here," Lucas said coldly. "You built all this, but for what? We don't even know you anymore." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Before Ethan could address the growing rift in his family, tragedy struck. Isaac Daniels, his trusted advisor and close friend, was involved in a devastating car accident while traveling to meet a client. The injuries were severe, and Isaac's kidneys were irreparably damaged. Without a transplant, he had little chance of survival. Ethan didn't hesitate. Despite objections from his family and colleagues, he volunteered to donate one of his kidneys. "He's done so much for me," Ethan explained to Sophia. "How could I not do this?" The procedure was a success, but the recovery period gave Ethan time to reflect. Lying in the sterile hospital room, he realized how far he had drifted from the man he once was. The empire he had built, the wealth he had accumulated, it all seemed hollow without the relationships that truly mattered. When Isaac awoke and grasped Ethan's hand in gratitude, It solidified something Ethan had been grappling with for months. His success wasn't defined by oil rigs or bank accounts. It was the people who had stood by him, the family he had neglected, and the friendships he had forged. Ethan left the hospital with a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just a man chasing wealth anymore. He was a husband, a father, and a friend, determined to rebuild the connections that truly made life worth living. The next challenge wasn't about climbing higher. It was about coming home. The Carter estate was bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun as Ethan Carter stood in the center of the grand living room, his family seated before him. His wife, Sophia, their 4 children, Lucas, Emma, Clara, and Sam, and a few close confidants had gathered, unsure of what to expect. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've spent years building something I thought was for all of you," he began, his eyes scanning the room. "But along the way, I lost sight of what truly matters. I've realized that wealth isn't just about money. It's about purpose, about giving back to the world that gave me so much." He paused, letting his words sink in. "That's why I've decided to allocate the majority of my wealth to a new charitable foundation, the Carter Foundation. Its mission will be to support struggling families, to give them opportunities like the ones I fought so hard for." The room fell silent, the weight of his announcement palpable. Ethan took a deep breath and continued. "But I also want to teach all of you the value of responsibility. So I'm giving each of you $10,000. There's one condition. You must use it for a meaningful purpose, something that creates real impact. I want to see how you choose to give back." His eldest son, Lucas, shifted in his seat, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. "You're giving it all away?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "What about us?" Ethan met his gaze firmly. "This is for you too, Lucas. Not in the way you might have expected, but in a way that matters far more. This is about teaching you what it means to create something bigger than yourself." Over the next few weeks, Ethan watched his children grapple with the challenge. Lucas poured the money into a flashy investment that promised quick returns, but ended in disappointment. Clara and Sam used their shares on indulgences, lavish vacations and expensive gadgets that brought fleeting happiness but no lasting value. But it was Emma, his second child, who surprised him. Quiet and introspective, Emma had always been the most thoughtful of his children. Instead of spending the money on herself, she reached out to a local women's shelter, using the funds to create a scholarship program for single mothers striving to rebuild their lives. When Emma presented her work to the family, Ethan felt a swell of pride unlike anything he had ever experienced. "You've understood the true purpose of this challenge," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And because of that, I want you to lead the Carter Foundation. You've shown me that you're ready to carry this legacy forward." Emma hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As the family gathered around to celebrate Emma's achievement, Ethan took a moment to step outside, gazing at the vast fields that had once been barren, but now represented everything he had built. He thought of his journey, from a poor boy working the fields to an oil magnate, to this moment where he finally understood the true meaning of wealth. Surrounded by the people he loved and content with the impact he had made, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. He had fought, failed, risen, and given back. His legacy was no longer just about success. It was about meaning. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the land as Ethan walked back inside, his heart full. The story of Ethan Carter wasn't just about becoming a millionaire. It was about becoming a man who understood what truly mattered. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button, share this story with someone who might need a little inspiration, and most importantly, subscribe to my channel. By doing so, you'll never miss another tale filled with lessons, emotions, and twists that make life so extraordinary. Thank you for being here, for taking the time to listen, and for being a part of this storytelling adventure. Here's to more stories that inspire and transform, and to your own incredible journey ahead. wishing you an amazing experience and the best of luck in all you do.